let's talk about this. Why was there this reaction against the U.S. In the Philippines, particularly under Duterte? Why did he move closer to China, and why has it now reverted back to a more pro-U.S. sentiment?
Well, there's a lot of speculation on Duterte's the reasons for his stance. Some say that he came from southern Philippines, and that he had more and his political ideology was anti-American, more, I don't want to say communist, but much more open to other things than being dependent upon America. And people can dispute that whether or not if that's historically accurate. But what we do know is what Duterte said, and what he said when he came to power in 2016, literally, a few weeks after the Permanent Court of Arbitration's ruling on the Chinese claim over the 9-dash line. The Philippine government, under the previous leader before Duterte, brought a case to the International Court of Law of the Sea. And for 3 years, this court met from 2013 to 2016 to adjudicate whether or not China's claim of the 9-dash line was legitimate under international law. And in July of 2016, the court ruled from The Hague in the Netherlands and said, no, it's not a valid claim in any way, shape, or form. And here's 500 pages of our rationale. A lot of us thought, wow, that's great. That's pretty amazing. This should really, help bolster international opinion about China's excessive claims in the South China Sea. But then you got President Duterte, who came in, and he just completely de-emphasized the permanent court's ruling, along with some elements of the Obama administration, I'm afraid to say. And then he just made some comments about, hey, if this is so important to the Americans, then they would have done more to help us, like in 2012 at Scarborough Shoal. So at 2012 at Scarborough Shoal, which is a more northern portion of the South China Sea, within 140 miles of Manila, at that time in 2012, the Chinese went there with some commercial vessels and started stealing, giant clams and coral heads out of the shoal. You guys have been there. And when they took that material or those resources from the Philippines weren't too happy about it. They went up there and inspected it and saw what was happening, and they kind of publicized it. And the next day, the Chinese came down with about 10 or 11 ships from different agencies in their, maritime system of Coast Guard, Bureau of Fisheries, and things of that nature, plus some PLA over the horizon. And the Chinese basically didn't like that. And it was an open standoff where you had Chinese vessels and Filipino vessels, commercial and military, kind of inside the shoal from April to June. And the United States got involved, and our representative from the State Department that worked for Secretary of State Clinton was a guy named Kurt Campbell, and he was the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and Pacific Affairs. And Campbell essentially became and inserted himself as this lead negotiator between the Philippine government and the U.S. In the Philippine government and the Chinese government. And when he did that, they thought they had an agreement. The Filipinos thought that there was an agreement that everybody on this one day in June of 2016 or 2012, everybody would just, depart from the shoal, and then they'd have a much more diplomatic effort to negotiate who really had ownership over the shoal. And when the day came, the Filipinos dutifully pulled out of Scarborough Shoal, but the Chinese didn't. And so that really angered a lot of Filipinos because they felt like the United States, through either ineptness or collusion, had stabbed the Philippines in the back.
And Kurt Campbell is now Biden's Asia czar, so he has only failed upwards.
Correct. And the Filipinos took that pretty harshly. And Rodrigo Duterte, when he was president, he mentioned that. And he said, you guys didn't help us out there. You didn't send aircraft carriers there. You have 5 aircraft carriers in the Pacific. You didn't send any out to help us. So why should we be so beholden to you or think that you're going to support us? So he was openly challenging through his rhetoric the foundations of the Mutual Defense Treaty. And that kind of simmered along through Duterte's 6 years in office. And then President Marcos has come in, and he's clearly said, I don't think that's the right way to approach this. We need to we need to be sure that we have our security through our traditional ally, the United States. We're not a fan of communist China in the sense that we don't think that they're going to be treating us fairly or nicely. They haven't in the past. They've abused us at Scarborough. They've been harassing us at Second Thomas Shoal. They've been doing other things to our fishermen throughout the South China Sea. And so let's not get too far down the road with, cozying up to the PRC. Let's get back to some balance here.
Well, why does Marcos has that confidence in the U.S.? Because to an extent, there is a point to what Duterte said. I mean, the Philippines is a treaty ally of the U.S., but, there was a misuse brief, there was the Scarborough Shoal incident. It really does seem like the U.S. is not standing up for the Philippines and in the South China Sea in general.
Has there been any acknowledgement from the U.S. government that what happened in the Scarborough Shoal in 2012 was a mistake?
No, not from anybody that was involved with that. Kurt Campbell and all the folks in D.C. that were involved with that continue to walk around and openly say that that was a successful event for them, even though everyone in the Philippines, no matter what political party they're from, views it as a failure by the United States. In terms of what just happened at Second Thomas Shoal on the 5th of August, I will say that despite them not saying anything about Scarborough in 2012, now at Second Thomas Shoal, we've had a statement now from the State Department within the first day after that event saying that, hey, this is not right. The PRC should not be doing this. This is bullying and harassment, very volatile, should not be done. And if this continues, we will have to institute Article 4 of the Mutual Defense Treaty, which essentially would be like, okay, you're attacking the United States as well, and we're going to raise this to the UN Security Council. So
something has changed. That's big.
That's changed, yeah. It's clear that they don't want to talk about their failures ever, the folks from the Obama administration. But the fact that they changed their behavior here is helpful. And I think it shows that by speaking out on forums like this and other places that we are making an impact. The other thing is you can say is there's kind of an inertia.
Wait, sorry, Jim, are you saying that because President Biden watches China Uncensored, he's had a stronger reaction?
He was making a nice point, and then
we can always hope.
Yeah.
So
carry on, Jim.
Yeah. Well, I think we can. It all counts, right? It all counts at the end of the day. And these kind of forums, whether written or in video, do have an impact. So I don't say that as a direct impact, but I think it does by the fact that we had the State Department make those statements, I think, on the 6th of August. That's pretty important. Additionally, I would add on that there's kind of an inertia. The negotiations for EDCA that were signed, that Enhanced Defense Cooperation, that agreement between the United States and Filipinos, those negotiations went back at least a half a decade before. I was witnessing them and watching them from inside the system. And so it took a long time, as these things do. But what you saw was that we returned, kind of like MacArthur after World War II, or in World War II, he returned to the Philippines. So we kind of returned the military to the Philippines. And slowly we've been proving ourselves in different ways and means. And then you had just this year the exercise called Balikatan, and it was the largest Balikatan in history, 75,000 military forces from a variety of nations, but predominantly the U.S. and the Philippines, exercising down there, closer to Palawan in that portion of the South China Sea, simulating how you would do an amphibious landing if somebody took one of your islands. So that's, I think we have to give some credit to the administration for not killing that. They've killed a lot of other things that were kind of on track from previous administrations when they came in on day one, like a pipeline or something. But this area of national security and our bilateral relationship with the Philippines, it's kind of, I don't want to say just maintained, but there's been concerted attention from Indo-PACOM and the State Department to continue to build on this, because we recognize how valuable the Philippines is in any kind of military situation in the Western Pacific, specifically with Taiwan. as I say, we have a mutual interest. All national security is based on self-interest. So we have a self-interest to keep Taiwan and the region free and stable and free access to markets and freedom of navigation. That's good for America. That's good for Americans. But we also, that interest is beneficial to the Philippines and beneficial to Taiwan and South Korea and Japan and other nations. So where we have mutual interest, we try to build on that. And so clearly the Filipinos recognize that the United States has at least recognized that they have to maintain our presence there, and the Filipinos can help us with that.